Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
I started out investigating lycopene for the skin in this episode. Lycopene is a red pigment in fruits and vegetables. It's a carotenoid. Unlike some other carotenoids, it is not converted into vitamin A. It stays as lycopene. And the best known source for lycopene is tomato products like tomato paste and tomato sauce. In any event, I started out looking for research on lycopene and skin health, and there's a reason for this. I've seen studies previously that if you have a lot of lycopene in your bloodstream, the skin is less damaged by the sun. It has some photoprotective activity. It doesn't replace wearing a sunscreen, but it's sort of giving you a little bit of protection from the inside out. And when I was discussing lycopene with my dermatologist, I used to have this celebrity dermatologist. She was brilliant, unbelievable credentials, unbelievable background, unbelievable education, Harvard and NYU. I mean, she's been a keynote speaker in these national meetings of skin doctors, of dermatologists. She's published in all sorts of medical journals for dermatology research. She's just brilliant and a great person. I moved, so I don't see her anymore because now I live like 50 miles from her, and that makes it difficult. But we were talking about lycopene for the skin, and she goes, "Jerry, lycopene has so much research behind it. It's so incredible for the skin that if we spoke about it the way it really has benefit, the FDA would convert it to a drug. That's how good it is for the skin." So I started out looking for meta-analysis on lycopene. I didn't want to look for individual studies, and here's why. Lycopene has a tremendous amount of human clinical trials behind it, and prospective studies, and epidemiological research behind it. And a meta-analysis, if it's done correctly, if it's done without bias, and done intelligently, proves if something works or it doesn't work. So I went into PubMed, which is the Library of Congress website for collating research. There's millions of studies on that website, and they're free to look at the abstracts. And then if you like to study, you go pay the journal and you pay for the entire study. In any event, I typed in meta-analysis lycopene, thinking that a whole bunch of meta-analysis would come up in the skin. But what happened, there was an awesome number of meta-analysis on lycopene for cancer prevention. Now, I knew that lycopene was related to reducing the risk of certain cancers of the digestive tract and prostate cancer. But the breadth of the research on lycopene with cancer. Now, mind you, I didn't look for individual studies. So there could well be studies out there for lycopene with melanoma, a very dangerous skin cancer, or lycopene with thyroid cancer. I didn't look for that. I looked for groupings of studies. So in a meta-analysis, they do a systematic review. They go through these websites like Ovid and PubMed and Embase, these scientific websites that collate evidence, and they look for the data, and then they download studies that are looking for the same outcome. For instance, lycopene and photo protection from the sun, helping prevent sunburns and skin damage from the sun. Or lycopene and breast cancer, or lycopene and prostate cancer. And I found 72 meta-analysis, which was shocking. That's a huge amount. That means there's so many studies involved, because every meta-analysis could be 5 studies, it could be 100 studies. They're reviewing studies that are looking at similar outcomes. And I was really bowled over by the number of meta-analyses that looked at lycopene for cancer. So lycopene is a naturally occurring bright red pigment. It's like fire engine red. It's found in fruits and vegetables. It gives them that bright red color. And it's one of a number of pigments called carotenoids. So you could find lycopene in tomatoes. And very ripe watermelons and red oranges and pink grapefruits and apricots and guavas, mangoes, but wait until they get really ripe. That's when you get the most lycopene. Now, as far as tomatoes, even though a tomato can have a good amount of lycopene, it's stuck in the fiber. You really want tomato products like tomato sauce. So there's a bunch of carotenoids. These are pigments in fruits and vegetables and plants that you know. There's beta-carotene. Beta-carotene is converted to vitamin A. There's lutein. Lutein is an orangish, reddish pigment that you get in green leafy vegetables like spinach and broccoli. You also get in pistachio nuts. Lutein is well known for having benefits for your memory and brain health and vision. And then there's zeaxanthin, which is a relative of lutein. That's a yellowish pigment. In fact, it's named after corn. Corn is zea maize, and the bright yellow color in corn comes from zeaxanthin. And zeaxanthin is another pigment that's needed for brain health and vision. And then there's astaxanthin. Astaxanthin is the pigment that makes flamingos pink or crabs and lobsters pink. Astaxanthin has a bundle of benefits behind it. I mean, it really is a very useful antioxidant in your muscles and your digestive tract and your brain and your eyes. It's a wonderful carotenoid. But now we're looking at lycopene, the red carotenoid, the red pigment. Now, if you use a supplement, you have to use natural lycopene. Like, we only use lycopene for natural sources that have been used in human clinical trials, so we know what works. In any event, most of the lycopene that people get in their diet is from tomato products. And once again, if you eat tomatoes, there's a lot of lycopene in there, but it's kind of caught up in the fiber, so you're not absorbing as much as you think you are. You get a lot more from tomato sauce or tomato paste. But even ketchup is a source of lycopene. The problem is ketchup also has a lot of sugar and a lot of salt. And not only that, and it's not ketchup's fault, but ketchup's associated with eating bad foods like French fries. So a serving of fresh tomatoes, even though it can have 4 milligrams of lycopene, you're not absorbing very much. When you cook the tomatoes down to make tomato sauce or tomato paste, the lycopene is released from the fiber. Plus, you're generally adding olive oil into it, which improves the absorption of lycopene, because lycopene is fatty soluble. So if you take it with some fat, you get better absorption of it. There's also lycopene in tomato juice, a good amount, but I don't really like tomato juice. The only time I have tomato juice is in a Bloody Mary, so there goes the health benefits out the window. So once again, a supplement has to be natural lycopene. I've looked at the studies. I've been looking at the studies on lycopene for decades. The first studies I looked at lycopene to make a multivitamin was about the year 2000 or 1999. And back then I could see studies from Israel and other places that synthetic lycopene just does not work in humans. It has to be natural lycopene. So if it's lycopene in a supplement, it has to be natural source. Now, let's look at some of the common cancers. So I found many reviews on lycopene reducing the risk of cancers. Now, I didn't find evidence that lycopene reduced the risk of colon cancer. Once again, there could be individual studies, but I didn't find a meta-analysis. So we're only going by a meta-analysis here. So let's look at common cancers. This is the Journal of the National Cancer Institute. It's the Channing Division of Network Medicine. That's Brigham and Women's Hospital up in Boston, but also Harvard Medical School. They work together all the time. And they're looking at carotenoids and breast cancer. And there's no doubt about it. Lycopene, compared to the highest intake versus the lowest intake, reduced the risk of breast cancer by 22%. It was solid evidence. It was solid evidence that lycopene reduced the risk of breast cancer. Now, here's how I have to put this in perspective. Breast cancer is a very common cancer. So reducing the risk of breast cancer by 22% is very powerful, because that affects many thousands of women in a very good way. So let's make up a fake cancer. Cancer of the pinky nail. Okay? If 2 people in the world got cancer of the pinky nail and you cut the risk by 50%, you'd be protecting 1 person. But if you cut the risk of a major cancer by 50%, you're protecting thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So when they looked at the blood level, when Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School looked at the blood level of lycopene, it reduced the risk for breast cancer by 22%. And it was the most common breast cancer, the hormone-dependent breast cancers. So now let's look at prostate cancer. This is the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, which is a great journal. It's the U.S. National Cancer Institute, Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health down in Baltimore, Harvard Medical School, Harvard School of Public Health, the Keck School of Medicine at University of Southern California, Los Angeles, so that's UCLA, University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, University of Hawaii Cancer Center in Honolulu, the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle. That's just the American research institutions involved in this study. There's like 50 other institutions from all over the world, from London, from Paris, from Madrid, from Rome, like Imperial College in London. Now, and also the University of California, San Francisco. So we're looking at 15 studies lowering the risk of prostate cancer. And here's what they found. That lycopene reduced the risk of aggressive prostate cancer by 35%. Now that's really important. Many prostate cancers are very mild. They never become life-threatening. In fact, people die of old age with these types of prostate cancer. But if it becomes an aggressive form of prostate cancer, so basically it's really mutating into a totally different cancer. It could spread into your long bones, etc. It becomes life-threatening. It's very difficult to treat. So lycopene, 15 studies, reduced the risk of advanced prostate cancer by 35%. Now, what about overall prostate cancer risk? That was vitamin E, surprisingly. Vitamin E reduced the risk of all prostate cancers by 14%. But when it came to advanced prostate cancer, it was all about lycopene. Now, let's look at lung cancer. Very devastating, very deadly, very dangerous cancer. This is the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. It's Mercy Medical Center in Baltimore, Maryland. That's the lead research institution involved with the study. They looked at 25 prospective observational studies looking at lung cancer and carotenoids. And they found 25 studies, hundreds of thousands of people. Lycopene reduced the relative risk of lung cancer by 19%. Now, once again, we're talking about a very dangerous cancer that's very common. So reducing the risk of lung cancer by 19% is protecting a lot of people. So we're looking at lung cancer, advanced prostate cancer, we're looking at breast cancer and lycopene, preventative effects. Now let's keep on going. This is pancreatic cancer. This is scientific reports. It's a bunch of academic research institutions from China, but they're looking at research from all over the world. And they found lycopene reduces the risk of pancreatic cancer by 16%, the relative risk of pancreatic cancer by 16%. That's actually pretty darn cool. Pretty darn cool. And here's another common cancer. Head and neck cancers. This is cancer epidemiology, biomarkers, and prevention. It's the Catholic University of Rome, their Institute for Public Health, and the University of Milan. And they did a systematic review and meta-analysis, 16 studies in total. 16 studies in total. Lycopene reduced the risk of laryngeal cancer 50%. And reduced the risk of cancer in the mouth by 26%. I mean, there really is something to lycopene. Now, let's look at a couple of other digestive tract cancers. This is gastric cancer. Now, gastric cancer in other countries is deadly. Worldwide, gastric cancer is the second leading cause of cancer deaths worldwide. Stomach cancer. Gastric cancer means stomach cancer. This is the Journal of Medical Hypothesis. They're looking at 21 studies. Lycopene reduced the risk of stomach cancer by 27%. Stomach cancer is very difficult to treat. Stomach cancer is very difficult to treat. I'm not trying to be scary here, but just some of these things in food, there are things in your pantry that lower your risk of cancer. Like broccoli, cooking broccoli. Like green tea, drinking green tea with lemon in it. Just let it cool down. Never have anything scalding hot. Let it cool down. Believe it or not, coffee, when it's freshly brewed, has been shown to lower the risk of liver cancer. Now, here's esophageal cancer. I actually lost one of my pharmacists. I used to have several pharmacies in Manhattan and New York City. And they were called Hickey Chemists. They were very famous pharmacies. It was so much fun owning those pharmacies. But in any event, I had this pharmacist, I won't mention his name. He was a great guy, but he was a smoker. And he also developed GERD, persistent heartburn, reflux disease. And he wound up with cancer in his esophagus, which was a horrible thing to watch this guy. It was just he was in pain, he couldn't speak, he had trouble eating. It was horrible. So here's carotenoid intake and esophageal cancer risk, and once again, another meta-analysis. So once again, all of these things are proof positive that lycopene lowers the risk of cancers because they're meta-analysis. A meta-analysis taking a bunch of studies that are looking at the same outcome, and if they're done properly and they're lacking bias, it's real proof that something either works or it doesn't work. So this is the Asia Pacific Journal of Cancer Prevention. So Asia Pacific Journal of Cancer Prevention would include China, South Korea, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, the Philippines, etc. 10 studies. Higher intake of lycopene absolutely reduced the risk of esophageal cancer by 25%. Reduced the risk of esophageal cancer by 25%. So my recommendation to you, if you get a multivitamin and you could get one with natural lycopene in there, get it rather than just a regular multivitamin, because then at least you're getting some lycopene every day. For instance, when I created my boxed multis, like we have the core multi and the Invite Performance multi, for high physical activity levels. We have the Invite for women and the Invite for men. I made sure I put 5 milligrams of natural lycopene in each one of those, because that's like getting a half a bowl of tomato sauce or a half a glass of tomato juice every day. That's how much lycopene's in there. You might as well get it, because lycopene, the other benefit of lycopene, it has benefit for protecting the skin from the sun. It doesn't replace a sunblock, and it doesn't replace being careful in the sun, but it's additional benefit. There's several nutrients that get into the skin, grapeseed extract, lycopene, and milk thistle, that help shield the skin from the sun. That and wearing a sunscreen and being careful in the sun, that's extra protection. And there's great data that lycopene reduces the risk of a stroke. Really good data. And there's some good data that lycopene helps normalize your blood pressure if it's elevated and helps lower the risk of heart disease. But I think the best data is all this data on cancer prevention. I mean, I just went through a whole bunch of... So it just makes sense to get some lycopene every day. So thank you for tuning into the Invite Health Podcast. You can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts, or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Please make sure you subscribe. Please leave us a review. You could follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. Now, before I sign off, eat your tomato products if you can. Eat your tomato sauce and your tomato paste, or drink some tomato juice to get some lycopene. Getting some lycopene from a multivitamin that's natural source lycopene certainly has some preventive ability. If you have any question on anything I said, let me give you an email address that connects you with 5 of my nutritionists, and you could send them an email and say, hey, I listened to this podcast and Jerry spoke about this and I have a question. In fact, you can ask him any health question that has to do with your diet, nutritional supplements, exercise, losing weight, etc. Nutrition@invitehealth.com. That directly connects you to 5 of my nutritionists. Nutrition@invitehealth.com. So I hope to see you next time on another episode of the Invite Health Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.